Right now, your body is actively building the cells you will rely on 3 months from today.
Which is, kind of hard to wrap your head around at first.
It really is. I mean, think about it. If you are going through IVF, uh, in vitro fertilization, the eggs your doctor plans to retrieve next week actually began their critical final stage of development 90 days ago.
Yeah, 3 whole months ago.
Yet most of us only start treating our bodies like a priority, the week of the procedure. We have this expectation of immediate point-in-time precision with medicine.
Right, like flipping a switch.
Exactly. You get an infection, you take an antibiotic today, and it starts working today.
Mm.
So there is this overwhelming assumption that the most critical part of an IVF cycle begins the moment you take that very first hormone injection.
And that creates a mindset where the biological clock only starts running when the medical intervention officially kicks off.
But the source material we are diving into today throws a massive curveball at that entire assumption. We are looking at a really comprehensive brief from a reproductive wellness center in New York, and it's all about this concept called the 90-day window.
It completely redefines when the biological starting line actually is.
Okay, let's unpack this, because what absolutely shocked me reading through this isn't that this brief is pitching some sort of mystical alternative medicine. This is strictly evidence-informed integrative medicine.
What's fascinating here is that this isn't just an abstract theory. Reproductive endocrinologists, the medical doctors who specialize in fertility, they are increasingly recommending this specific pre-IVF acupuncture protocol.
Wait, really? The traditional MDs are pushing for this?
Yeah, they are. Because it addresses the foundational biological environment well before the high-tech medical procedures even begin. It bridges the gap between traditional practices and highly specific modern reproductive science.
So to understand how a therapy like acupuncture is actually doing this, we first have to completely rewire our understanding of biological time.
Especially when it comes to the ovaries.
Right. Which brings us to the concept of folliculogenesis. Now, for anyone who hasn't spent hours poring over biology textbooks, what exactly is happening during this phase?
So folliculogenesis is basically the multi-stage maturation process of a follicle.
And a follicle is just the sac holding the egg, right?
Exactly. It's the tiny, fluid-filled sac inside the ovary that contains and nurtures a single developing egg. And this process isn't something that just happens overnight.
It takes a while.
It is a long, continuous cycle. According to the biological timelines outlined in our source, the final active phase of this maturation process spans exactly 85 to 90 days.
Which means the eggs a doctor might retrieve during an IVF cycle today, they actually started their final growth journey roughly 3 months ago.
Yeah, and that 90-day window is critical for you to understand. It is not just a passive waiting period where the egg sits on a shelf until the doctor is ready.
It's not just chilling there in storage.
Not at all. It is an active, highly sensitive developmental stage. During those 3 months, the environment inside the body is constantly interacting with that follicle. Everything happening in your system is directly influencing the chromosomal normality or the euploid potential of that developing egg.
That completely shifts the perspective. Because starting acupuncture just a week before your scheduled egg retrieval, which is honestly what a lot of people do, it seems like planting a seed in your garden the exact same morning you expect to harvest the crop.
That's a great way to put it.
You have to prepare the soil, water it, and ensure the nutrients are there for months in advance if you want a healthy plant.
And taking that analogy further, acupuncture acts as the tool to till that soil. It doesn't reach into a cell and magically alter a patient's DNA.
Right, you can't change the baseline genetics you're given.
What it does do is systematically optimize the physiological environment. By starting 12 weeks out, the therapeutic effects accumulate during every single stage of that developmental window.
So you're building up the benefits over time.
Right. You are ensuring the egg has the best possible chance to mature without the chromosomal sorting errors that often lead to failed IVF cycles.
I want to look under the microscope now because this naturally raises a big question about the actual cellular mechanisms. How exactly does a tiny needle placed on the skin change the environment of an ovary buried deep inside the pelvis?
It does sound a bit mysterious.
It does. I get that the soil needs watering, but how does the water actually get there?
Well, it comes down to some very fundamental biological needs, starting with blood flow. Developing eggs are incredibly greedy for oxygen and nutrients.
They need a lot of fuel.
A ton of it. If the ovarian blood circulation is sluggish, those follicles are essentially suffocating. They are trying to grow in an environment deprived of what they need to build complex cellular structures.
Which I'm guessing makes them highly vulnerable to damage.
Highly vulnerable.
But if blood flow is the core issue here, how do we know acupuncture actually changes it? Has anyone actually measured the blood flow in these specific organs?
Yes, absolutely. There was a landmark study that looked exactly at this. The researchers used ultrasound to measure the vascular resistance in the reproductive organs.
Like seeing how hard it is for the blood to get through.
Exactly. And they found that a specific type of treatment, electroacupuncture, significantly reduces the resistance in both the uterine and ovarian arteries.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the blood vessels literally dilate. It opens the floodgates, allowing a rush of blood to flow directly into the reproductive organs.
But blood flow isn't just delivering nutrients, right? It's also doing cleanup, which brings in the concept of oxidative stress.
It is entirely about cleanup. When your cells generate energy, they produce exhaust in the form of harmful molecules called free radicals.
Just like a car engine?
Exactly like that. And when these free radicals accumulate in the body faster than your natural antioxidant defenses can clear them out, they cause oxidative stress. Inside a tiny, delicate follicle, this is catastrophic.
It just wreaks havoc.
It causes cellular damage, it degrades the DNA, and it actually accelerates the death of the helper cells that are supposed to be protecting the egg.
Okay, so I've always heard antioxidants are important, but how does an external treatment change the chemical composition of the fluid inside an ovary? Like, is there data showing the fluid itself actually changes?
There's a really compelling randomized controlled trial that analyzed the actual follicular fluid, the liquid immediately surrounding the egg, in women who received acupuncture prior to their IVF retrieval.
And what did they find?
They found significantly higher levels of a specific molecule called L-cysteine in the acupuncture group.
L-cysteine, why is that one so important?
Because L-cysteine is incredibly important as a direct precursor to glutathione.
And glutathione is basically the body's ultimate master antioxidant, right?
Exactly. Think of glutathione as a biological sponge. During those 90 days of intense development, the egg is producing a lot of that cellular exhaust. The glutathione sponges up the free radicals before they can erode the cell structures.
That makes so much sense.
By increasing L-cysteine, acupuncture is effectively allowing the body to build a thicker defense mechanism around the developing egg.
Here's where it gets really interesting, but also where I need to push back for a second. The brief mentions that eggs have massive energy demands for fertilization. So they are packed with mitochondria, the microscopic energy factories of the cell.
Right, they need huge amounts of power.
And the research notes that acupuncture actually restores normal mitochondrial internal structure and improves the membrane potential in the cells nurturing the egg.
It does.
But how on earth does a needle in the leg or the abdomen reach all the way down to fix microscopic internal cellular machinery? It sounds almost like science fiction.
It totally sounds like science fiction until you break down how the human nervous system operates. We tend to think of the body as isolated parts, but it is actually a giant electrochemical network.
Okay, so it's all wired together.
Exactly. Acupuncture works via systemic signaling. When a specific point on the skin is stimulated, it triggers a sensory nerve. That nerve sends an electrical signal up the peripheral nervous system through the spinal cord and directly into the brain.
Wait, so the needle isn't physically touching the mitochondria in the ovary at all?
Not at all. The brain processes that incoming signal and responds by changing how it allocates internal resources. It sends signals back down the autonomic nervous system to modulate vascular tone, which is how those blood vessels dilate, and it shifts immune responses.
That is wild.
It is prompting the central nervous system to deploy the body's own internal repair mechanisms directly to the reproductive organs.
Wow. Okay, so it's like sending a highly specific distress signal to Central Command, and Central Command dispatches the specialized repair crews to the ovaries.
That concept of a central command is crucial here, because egg development isn't just a local event happening down in the pelvis. It is governed by a massive overarching control center in the brain, known as the hypothalamic pituitary ovarian axis.
Or the HPO axis for short.
Right.
Let's break down that axis. How does the brain actually talk to the ovaries?
It communicates through a very precise hormonal sequence. The brain releases follicle-stimulating hormone, or FSH, and luteinizing hormone, LH. You can think of FSH as the brain's voice yelling at the ovaries to start growing follicles.
And if those hormones are out of whack?
If these hormones are out of balance, the entire development process is severely compromised. Acupuncture works on this axis to help normalize that communication, particularly by lowering elevated FSH levels.
Which brings us to what I think is the most tragic irony of this whole IVF process, the stress paradox. The brief points out that going through IVF is agonizingly stressful.
Oh, it is incredibly stressful.
You are doing daily subcutaneous injections. You're constantly going in for ultrasound monitoring. There's massive financial pressure and just the heavy emotional weight of hoping it works while being utterly terrified it won't.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture of evolutionary biology, that chronic state of fear and anxiety triggers a massive survival response in the body. It spikes cortisol, which is your primary stress hormone.
And cortisol is bad news for fertility.
Yeah, very bad news. When cortisol levels stay elevated for weeks on end, it actively suppresses the reproductive hormone axis we just talked about.
Because if the body thinks it is literally running from a tiger, the absolute last thing it wants to do is expend precious energy on reproducing.
Biologically speaking, it shuts down all non-essential functions to conserve energy for survival. The blood is routed to your skeletal muscles so you can run, not to your pelvic cavity.
So what does this all mean? It means the very medical treatment that is meant to help a patient get pregnant generates the exact hormonal chaos that actively prevents it.
It is a brutal catch-22.
The stress makes the ovaries less responsive to the incredibly expensive IVF medications.
It is brutal, and this is where the integrative approach really shows its value. There was a pivotal study a while back that rigorously tracked women undergoing IVF. They measured their serum cortisol and prolactin levels throughout the highly stressful medication phase.
And the results were wild, right?
Yeah.
The women receiving acupuncture didn't show those massive stress spikes.
They didn't. The acupuncture group showed significantly normalized cortisol levels. It acted as a profound neuroendocrine buffer.
So it just blocked the stress response.
Essentially, yes. The treatment made their bodies mimic the calm hormonal dynamics of a natural fertile cycle, even while they were being pumped full of synthetic stimulation medications.
But did that actually translate to better clinical outcomes, or were they just feeling more relaxed?
Oh, it translated to a 26% increase in pregnancies and significantly more live births over hundreds of IVF cycles analyzed by that research team.
That is a massive jump.
By buffering the stress response, the body was able to actually receive and utilize the medical treatment without constantly fighting it.
Okay, so we've optimized the egg and built the perfect embryo. But that's only half the battle. You still have to put that embryo back into the body, which seems like an entirely different biological challenge.
It is a massive hurdle. Where does that perfect embryo actually go? The source material makes it clear. The most genetically perfect embryo in the universe cannot implant in an inhospitable environment. The uterine lining, the endometrium, has to be ready.
And for a successful transfer, doctors usually want the endometrium to be at least 7 to 8 millimeters thick, right?
Yes, that's the standard target.
Conventional medicine generally relies on synthetic estrogen supplementation to force the lining to thicken. But for a lot of patients, the body just doesn't respond to the pills or the patches. The lining stays thin.
And remember that study we discussed regarding blood flow to the ovaries? That same electroacupuncture protocol actively improves uterine artery blood flow as well.
So it's watering the soil of the uterus too.
Exactly. The endometrium requires a continuous, generous supply of blood to proliferate and build the ideal triple-line pattern that doctors look for on an ultrasound.
But it isn't just about making the lining thicker, right? It's about the biological quality of the tissue itself.
Quality is paramount. During an IVF cycle, you are introducing supraphysiological doses of medications. That means introducing way more hormones than your body would ever naturally produce.
Just flooding the system.
Right. This massive influx can throw the development of the embryo and the development of the uterine lining completely out of sync. Acupuncture has been shown to regulate the estrogen-driven growth and the progesterone-driven transformation of that lining, correcting those profound hormonal imbalances.
And then there are the receptivity markers. Modern science can actually look at the structural changes on a microscopic level to see if the window of implantation is open.
It's amazing what we can measure now.
It really is. Research shows interventions like acupuncture improve the expression of the HOXA10 gene, which is critical for uterine receptivity. It also increases the presence of penopodes. But what exactly are penopodes doing?
Penopodes are these microscopic, finger-like projections on the surface of the endometrial cells. You can visualize them literally reaching out to help catch and attach the embryo.
Like little microscopic hands.
Exactly, like little hands. But they only appear during a very brief temporal window, the window of implantation. If those structural fingers don't emerge on the exact right day, the embryo has nothing to grab onto and can simply wash away.
Oh, wow.
Acupuncture helps ensure the timing and expression of those structures actually align perfectly with the embryo transfer.
Okay, so month by month, we're seeing how deeply this pre-treatment prepares the body. But I want to address the listener out there who might be thinking, this all sounds great if you have plenty of eggs to work with, but my doctor told me my case is too
It's
difficult.
a very common fear.
How does this apply to the toughest diagnoses in the fertility world? If the garden is almost empty, does optimizing the soil even matter? This raises an important question. How do we view the limits of fertility? When we talk about patients with diminished ovarian reserve, or DOR, these are individuals with high FSH levels, low AMH, and what clinics call poor ovarian response.
Meaning they produce very few eggs despite maximum medication.
Right. These patients are often told they are simply out of options.
The stakes are incredibly high for every single cycle. And as the brief notes, acupuncture is not magic. It does not create eggs that don't exist. If the eggs are gone, they are gone.
What it does do is maximize the biological potential of the eggs that are remaining. When a patient has DOR, the brain senses the ovaries aren't responding well, so it pumps out more and more FSH. It is literally screaming at the ovaries.
Trying to force them to work.
Exactly. But if the receptors are burned out, more synthetic hormone from a doctor doesn't help. By calming that screaming brain and resensitizing the receptors, you can actually improve the response. Is there robust data for these specific difficult cases?
There is. There was a recent massive meta-analysis that looked at over a dozen randomized controlled trials involving hundreds of patients with diminished ovarian reserve. They found statistically significant improvements in FSH reduction and actual increases in the antral follicle count, which is the baseline number of resting follicles for these specific patients.
There was also a clinical trial a few years back where they took women with poor ovarian response and they did 16 acupuncture sessions before the IVF treatment. The result was a significant increase in the number of mature retrieved eggs.
And what's amazing is the most dramatic improvements were seen in women over the age of 37 who had previously failed IVF cycles.
Which directly challenges the conventional wisdom that age and previous failures mean the door is permanently closed.
It really does. It highlights that even in a depleted state, optimizing the vascular and hormonal environment yields remarkably better clinical outcomes. It's also worth noting that the integrative approach doesn't just apply a standard one-size-fits-all needle protocol.
Right, the author of our source brief pairs this with highly customized, compounded herbal medicine based on each patient's specific hormonal profile.
And he has earned immense praise from top-tier conventional medical doctors because of it. Highly prominent reproductive endocrinologists openly endorse his methods.
One specialist even noted that he's actually more versed in reproductive endocrinology than most active MDs practicing today. That is a massive endorsement from the Western medical establishment.
Because the proof is in the clinical outcomes. It is the sophisticated synthesis of ancient traditional pathways with modern genetic screening and hormone assays.
Let's do a quick recap of what we've covered because the timeline really frames the entire journey. Based on the 90-day window protocol, month 1 is the early recruitment phase. This is where you establish that vital blood flow, oxygenate the pelvic environment, and begin turning down the volume on that elevated FSH.
Then, in month 2, the active development phase, you are building the cellular armor. The glutathione antioxidant capacity spikes to sponge up the exhaust, and those mitochondrial energy factories inside the cells are structurally repaired.
Finally, month 3, the final maturation. This is where the eggs complete their development in a perfectly prepped vascular and hormonal environment.
And the uterine lining accelerates its structural readiness, sprouting those microscopic pinnapodes ready to catch the embryo.
You enter the IVF cycle in the strongest possible reproductive state, rather than a state of fight or flight panic.
It is a complete paradigm shift, whether you are currently cycling, prepping for the future, or honestly just fascinated by the immense complexity of how the human body works. This data completely reframes how we view reproductive health and medical intervention.
It really proves that biological preparation is just as vital as the medical procedure itself. Which brings me back to where we started. We are so conditioned to think of medicine like a light switch. You flip it, and you get an immediate, visible result. But your biology is not a light switch. It is a slow-growing garden.
Such a crucial difference.
Think about the profound concept of this 90-day biochemical window. If our microscopic cells are keeping a 3-month internal diary of our stress levels, our blood flow, and our environment before they even reach maturity, how else might this 90-day delay effect be playing out in other areas of our health and healing where we mistakenly expect instant results?